The old saying goes, you can't win the Stanley Cup in October, but you certainly can lose it. And there were a lot of teams that most of us figured would be out of Stanley Cup contention very early into October that are somehow kind of good. In fact, there are teams who are at or above 500 that I thought were going to be pretty bad this year. But the question is, are they actually good, or are they just getting some lucky wins? And we'll start with maybe the biggest surprise of the entire year, the Pittsburgh Penguins. Most people thought that they were going to be tanking for McKenna this year. It was going to be sort of a transition year. Fans watch Malkin and Crosby right off into the sunset. Maybe one of them even gets traded as they rebuild for another generational prospect. But through the first month of the season, the Penguins are pretty good. Pittsburgh has a 6-2-1 record, second in the Metro Division, and it has Pittsburgh fans thinking that the McKenna race is off and the race for another Stanley Cup for Sid and Gino is back on. Let's slow your roll, Yinzers, because the numbers tell a different story. When you look at the underlying analytics, there's a lot of reason to believe that the Pittsburgh Penguins are frauds to start the year. First of all, the Penguins' 5v5 expected goal ratio is 46.59%, which is 23rd in the NHL, meaning they do not control play at even strength most of the time. Their PDO in all situations, which is a measure of puck luck, is the highest in the NHL. When you look at their schedule so far, have they really beaten anybody that's that impressive? On the surface, the New York Rangers are a talented team that should be bouncing back, and the defending champions should be a quality win, but the Rangers have been bad to start the season, and the Florida Panthers are injured and underperforming. The only team on that list that they've beaten who has a winning record is the surprising Islanders, and only the Kings and Canucks are at 500. In addition, none of these games are particularly convincing wins. Yeah, they have a couple of 3-0 wins over the Rangers and the Sharks, and a 4-goal win over the Canucks, but in none of those games were they particularly dominant on the ice. Instead, this team is really kind of getting backpacked by their goalies. Tristan Jarry and Artur Silovs are both top 15 in goals saved above expected this year and top 12 in save percentage. They have been putting in some real work to cover up some of the deficiencies from the rest of the team, which is honestly better than I think most people give it credit for. I said from the beginning this team was not bad enough to tank for McKenna. Now that they're getting elite level goaltending, that's making them look like a really good team. But if that goaltending ever falls off, I think that they're going to regress back to where they should be, which is around the middle to bottom middle of the pack. Yeah, the Penguins, definitely frauds. Next, we have the Utah Mammoth, and this is a team that I thought was going to be a sneaky team to make the playoffs this year, and they look it right now. They are 8-2-0 to start the season, and that puts them on top of a loaded Central Division. But unlike Pittsburgh, they actually have a positive expected goal ratio at 5v5 of 52.75. That's top 10 in the NHL. And they have been getting a lot of puck luck with a 102.61 PDO to start the year. They also took home a win against a quality opponent in the Colorado Avalanche, have a couple of 3-goal wins, and looked very convincing in a few of their games so far. Most convincing to me is that their young forwards are just clicking. Schmaltz is leading the team with 16 points, but Clayton Keller's right behind him with 12, Dylan Guenther with 11, and Logan Cooley with 11, as well as 7 goals. It looks like this could be sustainable. I think that the Utah Mammoth are for real, and they're going to be a legitimate threat going down the stretch in the West. Now, before the year, I didn't think that the Anaheim Ducks would be even remotely competent this year, even with the coaching change that they made in the offseason, but they're 4-2-1 through 7 games, which is good enough to put them in 3rd place in a pretty weak Pacific Division. So are they for real? Oh, the first big red flag that I noticed is when looking at their schedule, anytime that they play against a really good team, they get dog walked. They lost to Carolina, they lost to Seattle, they lost to Chicago in overtime, and they only barely managed to beat San Jose and Pittsburgh by 1 goal, and those are teams that we thought were going to be pretty bad to start the year. But 2 teams who are really bad, Nashville and Boston, are the only teams that they've actually beaten convincingly. While their PDO or puck luck measurement is below average, their expected goals for at 5v5 is in the bottom third of the NHL, 46.21%, which is 24th overall. When you look at their games so far, they've basically been buoyed by some incredible games like Kyle Granlund's 5-point game, Cutter Gautier's insane goal streak. So given that they haven't had to play that many very tough teams and their expected goal ratio at 5v5 is so low, I think that they are most likely frauds. Now, the Red Wings were everybody's darlings after their hot 5-1 start to the season. They cooled off and lost their last 2 games, but they're still 5-3-0. In the Atlantic Division. So was the 2-game loss streak the beginning of the end, or was it just a blip on the radar? I think it was the latter, to be quite honest. While they don't have wins against many teams with a record over 500, the teams that they have beaten, like Toronto, Tampa Bay, Edmonton, were teams that most people thought were going to be among the contenders this year. Not dominating their wins either. Their 48.93 expected goal ratio at 5v5 is 20th in the NHL. PDO of 98.92 is 13th best. PDO is slightly negative, but just in the middle of the pack. And while, yeah, it's surprising that a 7th round pick in Emmett Finney has come out of nowhere to be second on the team in points, they're being led by Dylan Larkin. Brinkat has 8 points and Lucas Raymond has 6. They're getting contributions from the guys that you would most suspect, and given that they could actually be getting suboptimal goaltending to start the year, I think that the Red Wings might actually be a legitimate force. I don't know if they'll make the playoffs, but they're going to be competitive down the stretch. The Chicago Blackhawks might be one of the most insane stories of the year so far, given how low expectations for them were. But at 4-2-2, they're looking pretty good so far. Connor Bedard looks like he has finally figured it out. Nazar has arrived. Ryan Donato is stepping up. This team is looking like they could be a feisty one, but slow your roll there, Blackhawks fans. First of all, Chicago's PDO is 3rd highest in the NHL at 105.09. Their 45.55 expected goal ratio at 5v5 is actually 6th worst in the NHL. It's behind teams like the LA Kings, Boston Bruins, Penguins, and Sabres. And kind of like the Penguins, the Blackhawks are getting bailed out by elite goaltending to start the year from Spencer Knight, who has a 9.8 goals saved above expected, which is the best in the NHL through the first 8 games of the year. He has been one of the best starting goaltenders to begin the year, and I don't necessarily know that he can keep it up. Also won a lot of close games. 3 of their wins were by either 1 or 2 goals. Have only 1 win against a team with a better than 500 record in the Utah Mammoth. They've lost games to some of the flailing teams like Vancouver and Boston. In short, I think that Chicago is looking like a little bit of a fraud, and if Spencer Knight ever turns off God mode, they could be in some real trouble. Finally, we have the New York Islanders, who at 4-3-1 are somehow right in the thick of things in the Metro Division, despite the fact that they just had the 1st overall pick in last year's draft and were expected to be in a bit of a rebuilding phase. Did Matthew Darche actually rebuild this team in just one offseason? No. First of all, their expected goal ratio at 5v5 is 4th worst in the NHL. It explains why this team has only managed to win a single game by more than 2 goals. In addition, when you look at their schedule so far, yes, they got a quality win over Edmonton, who started off slow, and they beat Ottawa, who I thought was going to be good, as well as Detroit, again, might actually be a good team, but they also lost some games that they shouldn't to teams like Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. Look, the Islanders are a great story, and Matthew Schaefer has been on fire to start his NHL career. They definitely look like a team that has a very bright future, but as far as whether they're going to be in the dance come playoff time, would err on the side of them not making the playoffs.